Ladies and gentlemen, shalom from Israel. Wonderful to be with you. As always, I'm very thankful for the opportunity, hopefully to add knowledge and some better understanding about our interesting neighborhood called the Middle East. Today, we are going to have some interesting program. We are going to focus on one of the most known places in the world, but actually shortly, I think you will learn together with me that we don't really know much if you just base your knowledge upon the Western media. There is a story beyond the story. And what we are going to talk about is the story of Gaza Strip in a wider context, actually trying to understand together in the end of this program, what are the real factors that shape the reality of like almost 2 billion Palestinians in Gaza Strip, as well as the reality of many hundreds of thousands or more of Israelis. And I think that by the end of the presentation, we will all learn that it goes way beyond the regular media headline that we are all exposed to. So, ladies and gentlemen, and one last thing that I want to say in concluding this before we go in. It's a very emotionally, politically charged topic. I'm not coming from a place of the game of blame. If many of you may know me, I'm always saying to people, look, I found both Israelis and Palestinians quite equally responsible for the gloomy reality. So my presentation today is really not about a game of blame. It's about really understanding the story, but going beyond the headlines that we are normally exposed to in the Western media. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to talk, and of course we'll incorporate some maps and some figures and stuff like that. And in between, I will incorporate some short videos taken from the ground, from the area of the Gaza Strip. So that will be more or less the structure of this presentation. So without further ado, let us jump into the story of Gaza Strip, or as we call it, the story beyond the story. Many places in the world are known for their beauty, for their location, for their touristic attractiveness, perhaps their historical or cultural or archaeological legacy and significance. There are other places on this planet that are also famous, but for less pleasant reasons. They are mostly associated with conflicts, challenges, hardships, such as the place that you could see right beyond me. This is the Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is a small area. It's 8 by 20 miles, populated by some almost 2 million Palestinians. This is one of the most dense areas in the world. I'm standing in a location called Black Arrow. This is an observation point located some 5 miles south of the city of Sderot, and west of here you could see in the distance parts of central and northern parts of Gaza. In fact, the major urban area that you could see west of here is the biggest urban area of Gaza Strip. This is the center of Gaza Strip. It calls Gaza City. Some 500,000 Palestinians live in Gaza City. So in our presentation today, we are going to talk about the reality that has kind of like prevailed in Gaza Strip, and our starting point will be 2007. This is the year when Hamas, an Islamic Palestinian movement born in Gaza Strip, actually took over Gaza Strip. And since 2007, Hamas is controlling Gaza Strip. When you look at the reality since 2007 in Gaza Strip, and of course in the context of Israel as an outcome of that, you could actually notice some major components or features of that reality. First is the, unfortunately, rounds of violence between Gaza Strip that has been repeating itself, and each and every time round of violence was more severe than the one before. It was clearly an escalating process. We saw the militarization of the conflict, resulting in escalation on the ground, resulting in growing damage, collateral damage, life that were lost on both sides, people that have been wounded, people that have been losing their properties, and so on and so on. And actually, one of the major, I would say, feature of this whole story is what I call the lunatic reality. The lunatic reality of regular, normal people like ourselves on both sides of the fence, Israelis as Palestinians as well, who find themselves actually in the front line of a war zone. So let us try to shortly understand some aspects or dimensions of that lunatic reality. Now, bear in mind that for obvious reason, I cannot reflect to you the situation from inside Gaza Strip because I cannot go to Gaza Strip. But rest and be assured that, if I would go to Gaza Strip and reflect to you from Gaza Strip how lunatic reality is viewed by people of Gaza Strip, it will not be very much different from the reality that I will reflect to you on the Israeli side. So let us look at the Israeli side, the way it's being viewed.
I'm at the community of Netiva Asara. Right behind me, you could see actually part of the borderline between Israel and the Gaza Strip. In fact, you could see two lines of fences. The one closer to me is not the borderline, it is an inner fence that secures the community. Then there is a second line of another fence. And beyond the second fence, you could see this wall. However, the reason you see a wall right here is because that wall shelters the community's next building, which are some 50 yards away from here. And the wall is supposed to shelter those buildings from a direct sniper shooting. This is Netiva Asara, right on the Israeli-Gaza borderline. The racks of metals that you see right behind me, behind this fence, is a very mild representative of the term that we have been using, the lunatic reality. The remains of the rockets that you see right here is only a small exhibition of the dozens of thousands of rockets launched by Palestinian organizations based in Gaza Strip, particularly Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Palestine, targeting the town of Sderot, where we are right now, and many other Israeli communities. In fact, in the city of Sderot, they don't have sirens. They do have a system of loudspeakers scattered on the street. It's called Red Alert. And actually, when the raiders detect the incoming rockets, they send a signal which activates automatically this warning through these speakers, loudspeaker system that is deployed in the town of Sderot. The major challenge is that actually there is no real time to run for shelter because the town of Sderot is about 2 miles in area line from the northern part of Gaza Strip. So right now, if the loudspeaker system will go on, I will not have enough time to run for cover. And what I'll do, I'll just lie down on the ground, cover my head with my hand, and hope that rocket will not fall next to me. Israel has developed, as an outcome of that challenge, sophisticated systems. One of the very well known is the Iron Dome interceptive system. This is a system developed in Israel in order to try and to intercept the challenge of the rockets launched from the Gaza Strip. Indeed, that system is enormously successful. In the last military round between Israel and the Palestinian militant organizations in Gaza Strip, the Iron Dome system records some 90% or more rates of success. One of the interesting and significant things to understand about that system, it is not only saving Israel's life, it is actually saving the life of thousands of Palestinians. Had there been no Iron Dome system, and the dozens of thousands of rockets launched by Hamas and Islamic Jihad were launching and hitting Tel Aviv or Ashkelon or any other Israeli communities, causing death and destruction, Israel's operation in Gaza Strip would have been in an enormous scale. and accordingly could have been also the outcomes. It should be very clear, the military round between Israel and Gaza Strip are severe for themselves. Without the Israeli system of the Iron Dome, the outcome, the fatal, lethal outcome of such rounds would have been 10 times bigger in comparison. So the Iron Dome system saves not only Israeli citizens' life, it saves also the life of thousands, if not more, of Palestinians in Gaza Strip. Another significant challenge that also was to a large extent and is addressed effectively by Israel is the challenge of tunnels dug from Gaza Strip entering Israel. You may remember that earlier we talked about the soil of Gaza Strip. We mentioned it is a soft sand. You could scoop it with an ice cream scooper. This is a major challenge because Palestinians' militant organizations in Gaza Strip, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, has been specialized, taking advantage of the fact that the soil is soft, digging huge network, going miles and miles and miles of tunnels inside Gaza Strip, in the area that borders between Gaza Strip and Egypt, some 20 miles or even less away from here to the southwest, and also digging tunnels that are crossing from Gaza Strip to the next by Israeli communities. Some of those tunnels were actually heading right here to the community of Nahal Oz. In course of time, Israel has been developing technological and intelligence capacities to address that challenge, the challenge of the tunnels. As part of the addressing that challenge, as part of providing the solution as much as possible to that threat, one of the things that Israel has been working on for the last couple of years is building a massive fence, borderline. Right behind me, Israel has been building, and it's towards the final stage, a massive project of a fence that goes down deep to the ground, some 200 feet, even more. And actually, this is a fence that contains advanced technological sensors installed in the fence, and the purpose of that fence that is going all along parallel to the Israeli-Gaza borderline, the purpose of that fence is to actually block the path of intrusive tunnels coming from Gaza Strip, trying to infiltrate to the next by Israeli communities.
So, ladies and gentlemen, those were some expressions of this lunatic reality of everyday life. And again, I have to emphasize, if I would go to the Gaza side, I would reflect to you just the same story of a lunatic reality. We have to bear it in mind. In our session today, we'll try to understand what is really involved in the shaping of this lunatic reality. And this is a big story. We are looking at a conjunction of three major factors that are involved in the creation of that lunatic reality. One is an ancient power struggle in the Middle East. The other one is a contemporary power struggle over path, identity, and direction of the societies of the Middle East. And the last component is a contemporary hegemonic visions of some regional players. What are these factors? Why and how do they coincide now? And how and why do they, in the end of the day, and they are the major factors that shape the story of Gaza Strip and hence shape the story of the Israelis as well. In order to understand that, let us start with the contemporary power struggle over path, identity, and direction in the Middle East. In the 20th century, the people of the Middle East are introduced to the concept of a national statehood. And ever since its early day, this is a story of a struggle within the people of the Middle East. Most of the people of the Middle East are Muslims in their religion. Most of them are Arabs in their ethnicities. And from day one, this has been an ongoing story of a struggle between different factors that you could see in front of you. Islamists, sectarianism, Arabs and pan-Arabs nationalism. Those factors are engaged in this ongoing struggle over the question, what should be the features of a national statehood in the Middle East? Should it be an Islamic? Should it be one that emphasizes a man-made legislation rather than an Islamic legislation? What are going to be the relationship between the camps? This is an ongoing debate that actually caused an ongoing turbulences across the region. One of the most significant camps involved in this power struggle is an Islamist camp. You may be familiar with the name, the Muslim Brotherhood, established in 1928 in the Arab world by an Egyptian scholar. His name was Hassan al-Banna. And basically, the Muslim Brotherhood are standing for a couple of core agenda values. They are totally rejecting the concept of national statehood. They vote the establishing of a global Islamic entity called caliphate. They basically object the idea of any kind of independent nation statehood, including Arabs. They vote the idea that this global caliphate should be run according to the Islamic religious law, rather known as Sharia law. Why? Because in their mindset, the Sharia law is a codex that was given to mankind by Allah, God himself, and therefore it's flawless. It is immune from any mistakes. Hence, they are rejecting all kinds of political theories and ideologies like communism, socialism, liberalism, democracy, and so on and so on. They are basing their activity on issues like preaching, outreaching to the communities, doing hands-on social and economic involvement in everyday life of the people. They are deeply rooted in the minds and hearts of people in the Muslim world, and obviously, of course, in this region. And one other thing, they vow an internal animosity towards Jews and towards the state of Israel. In that context, I have to explain something shortly. Most of the Islamic theologists recognize that Judaism was indeed a monotheistic religion before Christianity and Islam, but they argue that Jews have betrayed their divine mission, and therefore Allah punished the Jews by dispersing them in the globe. Hence, according to that outlook, Jews are not a nation. Jews are people, but they are not nation and definitely should not have an independent state. So this is the core values of the Muslim Brotherhood, a major camp that has been involved constantly in the issue of what should be the feature of an Arab nation statehood in the 20th century and the 21st century. As you could understand, that percolated into the Palestinian society. The Palestinians are Arabs in their ethnicity, and overwhelmingly most of the Palestinians are Sunni Muslims. Shortly, we will talk a little bit about this issue of Sunnis because it also has to do with the story of Gaza Strip. In the late 80s, a movement is born in Gaza Strip. This movement is going to be known by the name of Hamas, Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic Resistance Movement. As you could see right in front of you, to the left-hand side, right here, you could see the founder of this movement, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. You could see the logo of this movement, Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya. This is the logo of Hamas that you see to the left-hand side. And beneath is the logo of its military power known as Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. Hamas is offspring of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas defines itself as the branch of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. We now understand that Hamas comes from the hub of Muslim Brotherhood ideology, meaning ideologically, Hamas vows the creation of an Islamic caliphate, and therefore rejects the idea of independent statehood, by the way, including the idea of an independent Palestinian state. And Hamas as such, being part of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, Hamas obviously vows an eternal animosity to the state of Israel. These are the core DNA aspects of Hamas, and we have to understand them and to realize that. On the right-hand side, you could see another Islamic militant group that emerged in Gaza Strip. It's the Islamic Jihad in Palestine. It belongs to another camp that is called the Salafi Jihadi. I wouldn't go into that. It's an interesting story for itself. The common denominator between the two, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Palestine, by the way, Islamic Jihad in Palestine is the second largest military camp in Gaza Strip. The common denominator among one of the things is, of course, the animosity towards the state of Israel. They both vow the elimination of the state of Israel. When you look at the ID of Hamas, here is the name in Arabic, written in English letters, the Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamist resistant movement. We talked about the history of Hamas, his foundation and ideological outlook, but I want to focus here on a very specific element which is very significant to understand in the context not only of Gaza, but particularly in the context of Gaza. And this is the term that you see right in front of you, the Islamic resistance. The word resistance in Arabic, al-Muqawama, became an integral part of the vocabulary of the people of the Middle East following WW2, and particularly in the last generation. Originally, this is a concept that actually vows the idea of centering identity around Islamic values, around Arab ethnicities values, rejection of the West, and so on. In the last generation, one major element that was added to that philosophy of the resistance was also the idea of rejecting any kind of compromise or acceptance of the state of Israel, but rather vowing the idea of al-Muqawama al-Musallaha, which means in Arabic, the armed resistance, meaning continuing the fight using violence until the state of Israel is to be eliminated. Remember this combination of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology that originally vows or reject the existence of an independent Jewish state, together with the concept of al-Muqawama, the resistance. That combination plays a very significant role in shaping the reality of the Gaza Strip, and particularly, of course, since 2007, our starting point of the session, when Hamas took over Gaza Strip. But when I'm saying Hamas took over Gaza Strip, from who? What was the circumstances and why? Well, the next thing could help us understand that better. As part of the power struggle that I was talking about earlier in the Arab world regarding the issue of statehood, I was talking about Islamists, we talked about Muslim Brotherhood, I was talking about pan-Arabs, Arab nationalism, seculars, leftists, and so on and so on. There has been two major camps formed within the Palestinian society and within the Palestinian political chart. And those two camps basically collide in 2007. You could see in front of you two major slogans or two major symbols. The one to the left is Hamas, and the one to the right hand is the Palestinian Authority that was established in the mid-90s as part of the Oslo Accords, the agreements between Israel and the Palestinians. The core pillar of the Palestinian Authority is a Palestinian organization that is called Fatah. Fatah and Hamas are coming from different camps in the context of the question, how do they view the issue of nationalism and statehood? Hamas is coming from the camp of Islamist caliphate, the one that rejects independent statehood. Fatah is coming from the hub that says, no, we don't stand for a caliphate. We stand for an independent Palestinian state. Hamas is coming from the hub that says people's lives should be guided by the Islamic religious codex, the Sharia law that I mentioned before. Fatah says, no, it should be guided by a man-made legislation through a parliamentary process. Hamas says, no concessions, no acceptance of the idea of Israel. Continue the fight forever and ever until Israel is to be defeated. Fatah says, yes, we tried that way, it didn't work. We better think about some kind of other path, maybe compromising, maybe concessions, maybe agreement. So you see that the two major camps of the Palestinians, Fatah on the one hand, the Palestinian Authority that controls parts of the West Bank, you see the map right here, versus Hamas, an Islamic Palestinian movement that was born in Gaza Strip. You see that the differences between the camps are across the board. They are deep. It's not only political differences, it's ideological differences in all major aspects of life. And in 2007, the collision take place in Gaza Strip, reminding you in 2005, in October 2005, Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip. Israel evacuated all the settlements that were in Gaza Strip, 21 settlements, almost 9,000 settlers or more. And when Israel evacuated Gaza Strip, Israel handed over the control over Gaza Strip to the Palestinian Authority. A year and a half later, in the summer of 2007, Hamas military force in Gaza Strip is conducting a violent coup and ousting and terminating the control of the Palestinian Authority in the Gaza Strip. And since 2007, Gaza Strip is controlled and ruled by Hamas. Parts of the West Bank is controlled and ruled by Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, and the two camps are totally split. So this is one aspect of the story of Gaza Strip to understand, meaning this is how and why the story of the battle, the struggle over path, identity, and direction in the Arab world, the story of the struggle over statehood. This is how it was channeled specifically in the context of the Gaza Strip. But as I said before, this is one factor that is involved in the story. There are two more to go. Now we are going to be introduced to another kind of a power struggle. This time, this is an ancient power struggle. It's not contemporary. It's not a power struggle that began in the 20th century. This is a power struggle that has been shaping the Middle East for centuries. And this is a power struggle within Islam, the major religion of most people in the Middle East. Islam was born in the 7th century, very quickly becoming a conquering empire and very quickly experiencing a split between two major camps. Majority of the Muslims in the world are known as Sunnis. About 80% of the Muslims in the world are Sunnis. The Palestinians, for example, are overwhelmingly Sunnis, like most of the Muslims in the world. The Sunnis are standing, one of the things that the Sunnis are standing for is that they argue that leading the Muslim world has to be done by the most suitable man for the position, the person that has the right skills to do that. Now that sounds very interesting because what does it mean? And that goes back to the story of the split within Islam in the 7th century. In its early days, the Islam empire was led by kings, rulers, rather known as caliphs. Hence the term caliphate that you are familiar with. The caliphs are the rulers of the caliphate. The fourth caliph of Islam was a guy called Ali bin Abi Talib. He was the son-in-law and cousin of Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam. Ali was married to 9 women. He had 21 kids. His first wife was Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad. Ali and Fatima together had 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. Ali was assassinated. His older son Hassan took his place for a while as the caliph, and then he stepped down. And the younger brother Hussein, that was the last male grandson of Muhammad by direct blood connection. Remember that. Hussein, the last male grandson by bloodline of Prophet Muhammad, he demanded the crown of leadership to himself. He said, my brother was the caliph, my father was the caliph, I'm the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, I should be the ruler. The caliph that was in power back then obviously rejected that. Long story short, in the year 680, Hussein bin Ali bin Abi Talib, the last grandson, male grandson, by direct line relationship, Hussein was assassinated with his followers in a place called Kerbela. This is Iraq of our times. We are looking at something that happened in 680. It's almost 1400 years ago. This is a split that continues to rock the region and the world up until our time. This is the split between Sunnis and Shiites. Sunnis are the majority that says leading the Muslim world is not about bloodline. It's about the most suitable man for the position. Shiites, the minority, some 17% or so. The word Shiite means a political faction. It's like the Hebrew word si'ah. And Shiites are saying, no, only a descendant of the 4th Caliph, Ali, a male descendant of the 4th Caliph, Ali, only him is entitled to lead the Muslim world. In other words, while Sunnis are standing for the merit, non-bloodline leadership, Shiites are standing for the bloodline leadership. The gaps between the camps are non-bridgeable, and for centuries, Sunnis and Shiites have been actually butchering each other. So you may wonder how that has to do with the story of Gaza Strip in 2021. What's the relationship between something that happened 1400 years ago and the story of Gaza Strip in our time? In order to understand it, we have to understand another aspect of the story. This is also about ancient power struggle between 3 major civilizations in the Middle East. Arab civilization, you could see here to the left-hand side. By the way, the script that you say, it's in Arabic, Allah, God. And Arab is the civilization who gave birth to Islam. This is the birthplace of Islam. Today, majority of the Muslims in the world are not Arabs. They don't speak Arabic. They are not from the Arab Peninsula. But Islam was born in the Arab civilization. The second civilization is the Persian civilization. While Arabs are predominantly Sunnis, the Persian civilization is predominantly Shiite. And then the third civilization that ruled the Middle East from the Middle Ages up until the 20th century is the Turkish civilization, to the right-hand side. The Turks are neither Arabs in their ethnicity nor Persians. The Turks, of course, are Muslims as well, but they are mostly Sunni Muslims. So you got 3 major civilizations that are fighting and competing for power. Arab civilization, which is predominantly Sunni, Persian civilization, which is predominantly Shiite, and Turkish civilization, which is predominantly Sunni. So you got different ethnicities And in the case of Persian civilization, also different orthodoxy of Islam, Shiites, while Arabs and Turks are predominantly Sunnis. So how is that has to do with the story of the Sunnis and the Shiites and the story of Gaza Strip? Let's take one step ahead. In the 21st century, a major struggle that shapes the Middle East is exactly that power struggle. Meaning the power struggle between Sunnis and Shiites and the power struggle between Persians, Arabs, and Turks. And in the 21st century, what we see is that those ancient power struggles, Sunnis versus Shiites, Turks versus Arabs versus Persians, and vice versa, those ancient power struggles coincide in the 21st century to result in a huge power struggle in the Middle East. That power struggle shapes the geostrategic landscape of the Middle East, and one of the places it shapes the most is a place that is called Gaza Strip. But you may wonder how Sunni, Shiite, Arab, Turkish power, Persian power struggle shapes the Gaza Strip. These are big forces, these are big names, these are huge nations of hundreds of millions of people. What it has to do with Gaza Strip? Well, let's try to understand it. It has to do with story of hegemonic visions in the 21st century, and we start with the Iranians' hegemonic vision. The Iranian hegemonic vision was defined by the king of Jordan, Abdullah II, by the name of the Shiite Crescent. He actually portrayed an attempt of Iran, reminding you, Iran are Persians and predominantly Shiites. And he portrayed this crescent shape of an Iranian attempt to establish themselves controlling the region in a kind of like a crescent shape that you could see right here. Notice where it starts. It starts right here in this far end point. This far end point that you see right here is Gaza Strip. And then it continues to an Arab state called Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, obviously crossing through Iran, Bahrain, crossing through Yemen and going into Africa. This is the Shiite crescent that actually represents the Iranian model of expansion and influence in the Middle East. Remember, Gaza Strip has a very significant component in that Shiite vision. Shortly we'll understand why and how. And one of the things that you could easily see is there is a kind of a corridor that actually connects all these places. If you want to go back just shortly, I will show you to you in a map. You could see the corridor that I'm referring to. This is an Iranian land corridor that stretches from Iran through Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and ends right here. You see this red arrow. You see it's pointing in this little place, 8 by 20 miles called the Gaza Strip. This is part of this Iranian crescent. Gaza Strip is a very significant part of the Iranian crescent and a very significant component in the service of the Iranian hegemonic vision. But you may, of course, ask yourself, why is that and how is that? Well, when you look at the structure of the proxies, the armed proxies that the Iranian has been establishing in this land corridor, look at this place, Gaza Strip. Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip are massively supported by the Iranians, armed by the Iranians, financed by the Iranians, guided by the Iranians. Gaza Strip became a central part in the Iranian vision of hegemony in the Middle East. Going back to the map and showing it to you once again, Gaza Strip, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, these are part of this Iranian hegemonic vision, and the symbols that you see scattered on this map are standing for the armed proxies that the mullah regime has been applying and deploying in this region. But the story doesn't end with the Iranian hegemonic vision, because there is another hegemonic vision. This time is Turkey's hegemonic vision under the leadership of Erdogan. Turkey is also interested to become the leading power in the Middle East. And Turkey also expands its presence in the Middle East. So here is a map that shows you, you see the Turkish flag scattered in different areas of the Middle East. Among those flags, notice one place right here that we saw earlier. Now we see it again. You could see the place that is called the Gaza Strip, right here, where Turkey has also a very much interest, a lot of interest in this place that is called the Gaza Strip. So Gaza Strip became a focal point not only for the Iranians for their own hegemonic vision, it also became a focal point for the Turks for their hegemonic vision. And the same way Iran nurtures and supports Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip, the Turks are also supporting Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip became a place that is significant for these two hegemonic visions of these big giant players in the Middle East. One is Turkey, the other one is Iran. And for both of them, Gaza Strip became a place of interest, not because they care about the Palestinians, but because it is important for them to use the story of the Palestinians in the service of their hegemonic vision. Here is something that is significant to understand. Both Turkey and Iran uses the story of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general, and particularly the story of Gaza Strip, as a tool to actually harvest dividends, credibility in the region, because both Turkey and Iran are positioning themselves on the Palestinian side, knowing that by doing that, they will gain credibility among the millions of people in the Middle East. And so Gaza Strip became a very attractive destination in that context. Both the Iranians and Turkey are focusing attempts in Gaza Strip because they know that the story of Gaza Strip attracts not only the regional attention, but the world attention as well. And both Iran and Turkey are using that as a leverage point. The story of the hegemonic vision of Iran and Turkey resulted in an interesting counter-reaction in the shape of forming of a counter-alliance in the Middle East that is composed of Arab states. You could see the flags in front of you. Major Arab states, Egypt, the Gulf Arab monarchies, Jordan, and also the state of Israel. That alliance is formed in the last couple of years. One of the major reasons for the formation of that alliance is the story of this hegemonic vision. It is a counter action to the threat, the challenge that is presented by the story of the hegemonic vision. So when you translate that into a map, and you look at the Middle East map today in terms of the geostrategic configuration, look at this interesting map. It shows you the spread of Iran and its forces. We talked about the Iranian Shiite crescent. You see through Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. Look at these arrows. They are all pointing at one specific location, a tiny 8 by 20 mile location that is called Gaza Strip. Look at this huge area. Gaza Strip could enter 1,000,000 times in the area of Turkey, 1,000,000 times in the area of Iran. But look at the center of these arrows that are all pointing into Gaza Strip. You got Turkey that is interested in Gaza Strip. You got Iran interested in Gaza Strip, and you got the alliance of moderation. You see these flags that are standing for this alliance that is also interested in what's going on in Gaza Strip, because Gaza Strip, to a large extent, became a focal point that channels this huge power struggle in the Middle East. The story of Gaza Strip, ladies and gentlemen, is way beyond stories of Palestinians and Israelis. It is a story of big giants in the Middle East. It is a story of big ancient power struggles in the Middle East. And all of those factors, the Sunni Shiite power struggle, the Arab, Persian, Turkish power struggle, the struggle over path, identity of direction of statehood in the Arab world, the hegemonic visions of Iran and Turkey in the 21st century. All these four big components are coinciding in the same time, in the same place, in a very specific arena, and that is Gaza Strip. Whenever you hear from now on Gaza Strip, I want you to think beyond the very narrow Israeli-Palestinian circle. Gaza Strip is an 8 by 20 mile stage of hundreds of square of kilometers and thousands of years of power struggle. This is the story beyond the story of the Gaza Strip. This is the story that is not told in the Western media. This is the story that if you really want to understand, you have to understand that the Israeli-Palestinian circle is only the small one. The big story is the story that I shared with you right now, the circles beyond the circles. So I want you to remember that whenever we are talking about the story of Gaza Strip. So if you want to summarize and look at the stories, how the hegemonic visions impact the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the context of Gaza Strip. So we talked about the fact that the story of Gaza, the story of the Israel-Palestinian problem, is a pawn used in the service of Iran and Turkey. Because standing by the Palestinians, echoing the slogan of the resistance that I was talking about earlier, provides both Turkey and Iran with credibility and credits among the people of the Middle East. And that brings us to a major understanding that we have to understand. From an Iranian and Turkish perspective, the worst thing that can happen is that there is going to be a settlement, an arrangement, an agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, because as long as they can perpetuate the conflict, as long as they can monetize the story of Gaza Strip, it serves them. Turkey and Iran has no interest in ending and solving the story of Gaza Strip. To the opposite, they have an interest in further perpetuating and fueling the flames of Gaza Strip. And that resulted in this counter-alliance that I was talking about, the story of the alliance of moderation that is formed, including major Arab states, Egypt, Gulf monarchies, Jordan, and Israel in the backstage, as a counter-reaction to this threat presented by the hegemonic vision of Turkey and Iran. And not surprisingly, the alliance of moderation has an interest to calm down the flames in Gaza Strip, because they know that if the flames in Gaza Strip continues, that is going to damage their own interests. To a large extent, the most recent event that you are familiar with has to do with that, and it's called the Abraham Accords, the peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, the beginning of peace talks between Israel and Bahrain, the normalization agreement signed between Israel, Sudan, and Israel and Morocco. To a large extent, this is part of the story of this alliance of moderation and part of the story of this huge power struggle between giants in the Middle East today. And Gaza Strip became a place where it became a stage for that power struggle.
My name is Avi Melamed. I have dedicated my life to help people understanding this region. If you want to connect the dots and to understand the news, book your online briefing now.